at that time, people really felt like they were at the effect of everything. And they were kind of victim consciousness, It's something we had to look at the circumstances before we could decide what we were committed to. And what happened in the training was you learned that you could commit and cause the circumstances. And that was a real turnaround. But you have to be careful because there's an edge there. There's light and dark.
Welcome to Evoke Greatness, the podcast for bold leaders and big dreamers who refuse to settle. I'm your host, Sunny. I started in Scrubs over 20 years ago, doing the gritty, unseen work, and climbed my way to CEO. Every rung of that ladder taught me something worth passing on. Lessons in leadership, resilience, and what it really takes to rise. You'll hear raw conversations, unfiltered truths, and the kind of wisdom that ignites something deeper in you. Your courage, your conviction, your calling. This show will help you think bigger, lead better, and show up bolder in every part of your life. This is your place to grow. Let's rise together. What happens when genuine transformation meets unchecked power? In this episode, I sit down with the legendary Marcia Martin, one of the original architects of the human potential movement, and a woman whose story helped shape the $48 billion self-help industry as we know it today. We talk about the rise of EST, her behind-the-scenes role in launching transformational giants, and the untold story behind her powerful new memoir, Sex, Power, and Transformation. Marcia opens up about the seduction of certainty, the cost of surrendering your voice, and the courage it takes to reclaim authentic power in a world that often confuses charisma for truth. If you've ever been drawn to self-development, leadership, or the pursuit of purpose, this conversation will challenge you to look deeper at what it really means to grow, lead, and to transform without losing yourself in the process. Let's hop into it. Welcome back to another episode of Evoke Greatness. Today's guest is a woman whose fingerprints can be found across nearly every major movement in personal development over the last 50 years. Before the stadiums filled for Tony Robbins, before The Secret became a global phenomenon, and before personal transformation grew into a $48 billion industry, there was EST, Erhard Seminars Training, and behind its meteoric rise was the brilliant, relentless, and visionary leadership of Marcia Martin. As a founding member and vice president of EST, now landmark worldwide, Marcia helped architect one of the most influential transformational organizations in history. She trained over 300,000 individuals worldwide, coached executives from Fortune 1000, co-created the Transformational Leadership Council with Jack Canfield, and even helped orchestrate the film shoot for The Secret. Her impact spanned corporate boardrooms, international stages, and the deepest corners of human potential. But her story is more than just accolades. In her riveting new memoir, Sex, Power, and Transformation, the inside story of the rise of the self-help empire told by the woman who helped build it. Marcia unveils the untold story behind the rise of this self-help empire and the cost of devotion, ego, control, heartbreak, betrayal, redemption, and ultimately reclaiming authentic power. I know personally it's a roller coaster of emotions. It's raw, it's funny, heartbreaking, and really a soul-shaping exploration of what happens when genuine transformation collides with human flaw. What you're about to hear is a masterclass in self-leadership, discernment, feminine strength in a man's world, and the courage that it takes to evolve publicly. Marcia, welcome to the show.
Wow, I want to meet myself after that.
Right?
I'm just so delighted to be here. It's really an honor. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to have you on. I know I've really, really been looking forward to this. I have such a passion when it comes to personal development. I know the road that I've traveled over the last 12-ish years since I found it myself personally. And so I have been absolutely hungry to dig into this with you and hear more. I got to read, so hold up the book here. I sunk my teeth into this. And as I mentioned in the intro, it truly is a It is a roller coaster of emotions. Just when you think you know maybe what's going to happen next, you're surprised. So I would love to talk through, let's kind of go back a little bit. Your memoir takes us inside the rise of the human potential movement. For listeners who only know the industry, not the origin story, just the industry, what was happening culturally that made millions of people hungry for transformation at the time?
It was, well, first of all, to set the scene, it happened in San Francisco in the early 70s, the late 60s, when we called ourselves flower children or hippies. And Haight-Ashbury was the center of that. And there were a couple of really great, wise people who were offering human potential courses that would allow you to become more of yourself and more powerful, more happy, more wealthy, more all of the things we want to be. Michael Murphy had started Esalen in Big Sur. Jose Silva had started Silva Mind Control. There was Science of the Mind. Alexander Everett started Mind Dynamics. And at the time, it was really the baby boomers who were longing for peace and felt that love was the answer, and that we should get out of Vietnam and not be at war, and we should take down President Nixon because he was like corrupt. And it was time for people to really understand who they were, and that we were all brothers and sisters and we should work together. So it was an opening of young children, really, because we were in our late teens, early 20s, who just longed for being able to have peace and being able to have joy. And San Francisco was kind of the mecca where it all came together. So those small little courses, a man by the name of Werner Erhard took a training from Alexander Everett, and he was trained to be a trainer in Alexander's trainings called Mind Dynamics. And the first Mind Dynamics training was held in February of 1971 in San Francisco, which was facilitated by Werner, and I happened to be there. And, I was kind of a flower child. Think of a hippie in an embroidered shirt and flowered pants and a cowboy hat, sitting in Golden Gate Park, playing the guitar, putting her floppy leather hat out in front of her, asking for coins. And then if I saw someone that it looked like they needed the money more than me, I would give them my money. So it was just an amazing time. And everybody had a spare couch or a floor that you could sleep on. Everybody helped everybody else. It was the beginning of drugs also, but not in the way of hard drugs or criminals, or it was just exploration and mind bending and mind opening. Everybody was starting to just smoke a little bit of pot. There wasn't really hard drugs then. It was just a really, the Hare Krishna were running around in their orange robes with bells and telling you that you shouldn't eat meat or you would have low consciousness. And it was just, people were starting to meditate. It was a really wild time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I marked a couple of spots here that I wanted to go to. It got me thinking about the power of influence, right? Influence isn't, I think some people inaccurately categorize influence as like, oh, it's a sales, like only salespeople have that type of influence, when I really think everyone has the capability of influence. But this was when you were sure that you were going to be at the training. You couldn't afford that training. You called up, you actually got a hold of Werner, you said, like, I don't know, but I'm going to be there. I need to be there. And a sentence stood out to me, and that was, looking back now, I see it was also my first lesson in the intoxicating power of absolute certainty, a force that would eventually transform thousands of lives while destroying others. We see it much more today as influencers kind of overwhelm our feeds, and we're exposed to that so much more. Then these kind of handful of people stood out. And I think about like that air of confidence or certainty. And you mentioned it, like it's intoxicating. What do you think was it about the training that he received that allowed him to kind of emit that sort of air?
Well, Werner Erhard is still, he's alive, and I still care for him very deeply, was a brilliant man.
Mhm.
I learned so much from him. And he was wise beyond what you would call educational kinds of intellect. He had an understanding of people. He had an understanding of what you're calling influence or marketing. He could mesmerize you, and he had total confidence in himself. But I think what is one of the things that's the themes of the book is that we have to be careful, because when someone else has so much confidence and you are wondering your own confidence about your own confidence, and they seem to have the answer, you have to be careful that you don't allow them to give you your answer, but that you take their answer within yourself and consider it and learn from it, and then find your own way of knowing yourself and how that should relate to you, rather than just taking the word of somebody else. And that's how it started. When we did Mind Dynamics, when we started EST, it was to show people that they had personal power and that they could take responsibility and they could create their own destiny and they could create their own future. Because at that time, people were really felt like they were at the effect of everything. And they were kind of victim consciousness,
Mhm.
it's something we had to look at the circumstances before we could decide what we were committed to. And what happened in the training was you learned that you could commit and cause the circumstances. And that was a real turnaround. But you have to be careful because there's an edge there. There's light and dark. And so it's great that people have good answers. But if you just take those answers blindly and don't put them in your own value system, don't put them in your own way of viewing, don't put them in your own life and experience to consider, is this a good answer for me? Is this a good truth for me? So I am so pro personal development, and it's caused so much growth and expansion and just amazing miracles for people. But the little bit of the edge of the sword is you have to be careful that you just don't go outside yourself for answers, that you go within.
Yeah. You were the one who put EST on the map. And I'm curious, what was it like being at the center of something so groundbreaking and at times very controversial at such a young age?
Yeah, I was in my early 20s. Well, first of all, there was a team. Three other women and myself worked very closely with Werner. Werner had a team of other people. It was a small team, though. And I happened to be the vice president of EST. So when we started, there was 30 people in the first training, which was Mind Dynamics. By October, we had 1,900 graduates. And Laurel, Hanukkah, and Elaine, the other women on the team who were just as amazing at building an organization and were part of the team with me and with Werner. We filled those trainings. We inspired the guests to enroll. We got the people in the training. Werner was a brilliant trainer. And so if you took the training from him, you wanted to bring guests for him to tell you why they should take the training. And if you brought a guest, they ended up in a guest seminar with Laurel or Elaine or Hanukkah or I leading the guest seminar, and we could tell you why you should be in that training, and you enrolled. And so we started with the 1,900 graduates in October. By the time I left, almost 10 years later, there was over 500,000 people that were graduates. And that was my job. So that's why Werner said I put EST on the map,
Yeah.
because that was my job. I'm supposed to fill the trainings. And by the time I left, I had 5,000 people working for me as either volunteers or staff. We were a large organization. We were leading 2 and 3 and 4 seminars in, each of 10 cities, so to speak, and with 250 in each of those trainings. So it went, and it was a fast ride. And to answer your question, I didn't really notice it while it was happening
Mm.
because, here's how it started. Hanukkah invited the people that took the training because she worked for Werner at the time, over to her house. And Werner said we could come and he would give us some advanced training. And so there was 30 graduates and maybe 20 or so came to that first after the training kind of seminar. We sat on the floor in the living room in a circle with Werner, and he had said we could bring guests. So there were some guests. And then what would happen is the guests would go into the bedroom. And at the time, Laurel would sit on the dresser in the bedroom and tell the people that were guests about the training. Eventually, I was sitting on the dresser in the bedroom with the guests, telling them about the training. And then we grew so much that we couldn't be in Hanukkah's house anymore, so we had to get a hotel room. But it was a small hotel room. And so then we would do guest seminars at the hotels. And then pretty soon it was the Masonic Auditorium. And the next thing I knew, I was filling the Cow Palace with 10,000 people. So it was just one of those things that kept growing. I think it surprised Werner even. I think he probably thought, we'll probably do this in a few cities and that'll be great and I can retire maybe.
Yeah.
I had a vision though. I saw it from the beginning. I had a vision that there would be millions of graduates. And as you know from reading the book, I had been training with my aunt who was a clairvoyant teacher before I met Werner.
Right.
And so I had already learned how to meditate and I had already learned about the inner world and how one accesses their own personal power. And so for me, the reason I wanted to be in that training so badly, even though I didn't have any money, wasn't that I thought I needed it. It was because I thought this is going to teach the masses what I had been learning from my aunt. And what I had been learning and studying for the previous 2 years from my aunt was who I really was and the power that I really had and the nature of that we're all connected and the power of love and the power of responsibility and how to create and intend something. And so I was all excited to take this to everyone because it was so enlightening for me. And you know what it's like when you have a personal development course and you have insights about yourself and you learn things and you can do things better and you just tap into more human potential that you haven't used before. So I was exhilarated that this was going to go to so many people. And I wanted to be part of that happening. So, yeah. And then I think we were all just on the road of it happening. There was so much work to do. Literally, it was a commitment. I know that the purpose of the S training in the beginning was to transform the way in which you're experiencing living so that the situations you've been putting up with or trying to change clear up just in the process of life itself. Well, the purpose of the staff, Werner told us, was to create a critical mass of consciousness so that a turning could take place. And he had the wisdom to know that if there was enough consciousness that we could shift the very perspective of humanity, that this could be about people being responsible instead of being victims. And so it was a huge thing that we were on a mission and we came to work at 7 a.m, if not earlier, and we were there till 2 a.m, if not later. And that was 7 days a week. And there was a cause that we were for. So it wasn't a job.
Right.
It was a cause.
Your book explores how authentic transformation can become twisted by power. What are the earliest warning signs that guidance is crossing the line into control? I think back to the fishbowl chapter.
Yes, the fishbowl and the pit.
Yes.
Scary times. That was a different time in personal development where people were doing encounter groups and people thought that the best way for you to learn who you were was to beat you up, so to speak, whether it was verbally or, physically. And that you would find yourself somehow in those times. Well, here's the deal. For me, it's when somebody tells you they have the answer. Not that they have an answer that works for them and even has worked for lots of other people that you might consider, but that when it becomes righteousness, when it becomes I'm better than you and I know more than you, Something happens when the people who are the trainers or the gurus or the leaders, when they start saying it's my way or the highway, because my way is the right way. Something happens then where people are afraid to share their own voice because at times you realize, well, I don't think that person has the right answer, at least for me, but we don't share it. We get frightened and we keep our voices to ourselves. And I think that that's a little bit of what's going on in the whole world today. Is
Right.
there people that say they know the best way or the only way? And if you don't agree with them, then you're wrong and left out. And you feel ostracized if you have a different point of view and a little bit afraid to say what your point of view is. And I think that's one of the first warning signs is when somebody else says, here's the way it is.
Mm.
I also think there's a warning sign when, because there's so much good information, there's great books, there's great teachers, there's great wisdom that's come down through thousands of years from all the wise, holy men and women in the world. But that wisdom is presented to you and you have to process it. You have to consider it. You have to take it into your life and say, well, this works for me. Not this is right or wrong, but whether this works or not for me to have the life that I want, for me to make the contribution that I want, for me to be an effective person as I want to be. And if you're going on the outside to somebody else to find your answer, that's the wrong place to look. You have to go within. And when you take the answer from somebody else as if it's the answer for everyone, including you, that's another warning sign. So, but it's a scary road, enlightenment, because you have to, it's the unknown. You're a pioneer. You're discovering the innermost knowledge of how life works when you go within. It's the same when you pray. It's the same when you meditate. It's the same when you're still. And suddenly, what happens when you're still is you realize how noisy your mind is. We're
Right.
filled up with fears and doubts and trepidations and things that you think are important and trying to please people and all sorts of things that we worry about or that we regret or that we resent. And to get to the place where you can still your mind to find and hear the real answers for yourself takes some commitment. And it's a lot easier just to take somebody else's answer and go ahead and just do it their way, you see? So,
That's exactly right. And with the noise of the world today, with so much social media and short attention
mm,
span to just continue clicking through videos and you're right, it really resonates when you said it's kind of common in the world today because everyone is just committed to being right. Not to
yeah,
understanding, not to learning or being open to the fact that maybe I'm not 100% right. Maybe it's possible that I'm not, but they're committed that they
yeah.
know the right way. And so I think
Well,
I
here's the
think
thing,
that's a really good warning sign.
yeah, it is because think about this. I kind of look at it. There's a few things that I feel people should know and consider. And one of them is when you look at human beings, just watch them. What's important?
Mm.
What do they do first? What are they, what I call thrown to? What's automatic that you kind of go to by default? Well, I think it's three things. You want to be right, you want to look good, and you want to know the answer.
Mhm.
You get up in the morning, you don't say, today, I hope everything goes wrong and I'm stupid and clumsy and I don't even know what the answer to it is. No, you say, today I'm looking good. I'm gonna hit the ball out of the park. I'm on my game. I'm right. Looking good. I know the answer. And nobody wants to say, I don't know. People will find lots of things to tell you, even if they don't know,
Right.
pretending that they know, right? So you've got that people are thrown to being right, looking good, and needing to know the answer. That's
Mhm.
an automatic thrust, right? So now think about it. When you learn a new skill, you're a beginner. Well, what's a beginner? It's a person that's wrong most of the time, makes a mess, looks stupid, doesn't look good at all, and doesn't know any of the answers. And
Right.
so nobody's really happy or willing to be a beginner.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you instead of a beginner? Well, you're a pretender. We all pretend that we know what we're doing, and we're all afraid that we don't.
Right.
So then I noticed that there's really three faces. There's the face of you that you pretend to be. And why do you have that face? Because of the face that you're afraid that you are. You pretend to be confident because you're afraid that you don't know what you're doing. You pretend to be loving and being loved because you're afraid that you're not really worthy of whatever's happening in your life. Well, here's the wonderful good news, I think, is there's a third face, which is the person who you really are behind the fear. Now, the only way you can get to your fear is if you let go of your pretense. In other words, as long as you're pretending, you can keep those fears at bay. But the minute that you drop your pretense into an authentic way of being yourself, your doubts and fears come up for you to face. If you have some way of dealing with those fears and doubts, which is, I think, what personal development should be, it's the teachers, the books, the education, the wisdom that allow you to feel safe enough and strong enough and courageous enough to face your fears. Because if you do face your fears, you find that they disappear because they're not really that real. And if that face comes down, you get to be in touch with the face of who you really are. Now, what's interesting is who you really are is exactly what you're pretending. You see, you really are able. You really are loving. You really are able to love. You really are perfect. You really are wonderful. You really are all of those things you're pretending to be. But the experience of being in touch with that is totally different than pretending it.
Mm.
And so that for me is personal development. Is my work has always been to be with people in such a way. And I'm a coach and I'm a corporate trainer and I work with human beings so that they can learn the secrets of being more effective in life. But really what I teach them to do is how to access their personal power, how to find out who they really are and be in touch with it and come from it. And when you're able to do that, you can create miracles. So, it's an interesting journey, this spiritual journey, quest, personal development, self-help. It's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure.
Clearly, after reading your book, right? Like that is crystal clear.
Don't you think my book is, when people say, like, look at my book, it's Sex, Power, and Transformation, the story of, the inside story of the rise of the self-help empire. But it's more than that. It's
Yes.
really a thriller. It's a
It is a
memoir.
thriller.
It's a
Yes.
story. It's my life, and I was able to tell it in such a way that people feel it and go through it with me as they read it. And it's a page turner, is it
Yes,
not?
it is. I have
Yeah,
a I have when I read, my mind visually almost like projects a movie as I'm reading. And so I
yeah,
can get like really wrapped up in a book. And it's interesting, like you almost feel a little emotionally exhausted
yeah,
after all that goes on because it's like there's not too much of a downturn yet and you're going back up. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. Plus just
yeah,
my commitment to personal development and knowing what it's done for me over the course of my life. It's fascinating to get that kind of peek behind the curtains of how did this really come about?
yeah. And I think it's interesting because it's how things really come about,
Yeah.
not just the personal development industry, but
Right.
innovation is, the best. Your invention of what you need to do sometimes is the best method of learning what to do, right?
Exactly.
Because you
Yes.
have to. And we were all just swimming, you know, like take the next stroke and figure out
Right.
what to do next. And it was going so fast, we couldn't think about whether or not we were doing it right or wrong. We were just involved.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is a fun story for sure.
Okay, this is where we hit the pause button. If you thought this conversation pulled back the curtain, just wait until next week. In part 2, Marcia and I go even deeper into the aftermath of transformation, the personal cost of chasing enlightenment, and what it really takes to rebuild after betrayal and burnout. She shares the moments that nearly broke her, the lessons that saved her, and how she reclaimed her power to become one of the most respected voices in leadership and transformation today. It's raw, redemptive, and absolutely unforgettable. So be sure to check back next week for part 2. If today's episode challenged you, moved you, or lit a fire in your soul, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with somebody who's ready to rise. Could I ask you to take 30 seconds to leave a review? It's the best way to say thank you and help this show reach more bold leaders like you. Because this isn't just a podcast, it's a movement. We're not here to play small. We're here to lead loud, one bold and unapologetic step at a time. Until next time, stay bold, stay grounded, and make moves that make mediocre uncomfortable.